I think we're going to get started if that's all right.
Block down. So who do you want me to block?
Bottom left.
There we go. Good.
Start with an introduction of
That's great. Yeah, we can start.
various cities represented and our hosts. And then we're going to hear from reunion chairs. And then we'll turn it over to some Q&A and some remarks from Jim Kim. And we're thrilled that you're with us this evening. It's very fun.
I'm thrilled to have you all here in my office.
A good evening event. So Merle Alderman is hosting in Burlington. Terrific turnout there. Welcome, fellow classmates. Michael Palitz hosting in New York City. Brian Boyer is hosting in Chicago, and Cami Bilger and Brad Koenig are hosting in San Mateo. And there's a few folks on the phone as well calling in. So why don't we start with a little bit of remarks from Merle and Cami about the reunion.
Okay, great. And I assume everybody can hear me because I'm the one who gets to start this, I guess. We just want to be sure that everybody knows that the reunion planning is moving forward. We really, really appreciate Cami in San Francisco, and I have been working diligently, and we're up to about 115 classmates who have said they're coming. But as I look around all of these rooms, I know there's a couple of people here, like Alex. I'm assuming you're coming. You haven't told us that you're coming. And yeah, we have a number of you who haven't said you're coming, and we want to count you as well. The goal is to build attendance as much as possible and to make this, as I say, the best reunion of the new century. So we certainly do invite everybody to participate, to come, and we hope that the weather holds up this time. I'm going to have Cami talk a little bit about the program, and then we'll pass it over to the real content at hand.
Okay, great. Thanks, Merle. So our theme is Forever Green, and we're focusing on Dartmouth's role in the environment with a showcase at Thayer. And we're also having panels of faculty who will talk about sustainability. In addition to our environmental theme, we're going to be having a creativity showcase. And so the artists in our class, the poets and the writers and the painters and photographers, are going to be able to display their work, and then we'll have a silent auction, and some of the proceeds will go to benefit Dartmouth. We have a Jacko tour of the campus, which will be kind of a fun twist, seeing Dartmouth through the eyes of Dr. Seuss with kind of Jacko humor. We'll have a golf tournament, and of course the fraternity and sorority open houses, the academic open houses, and just being in Dartmouth with your friends. So please come. We look forward to seeing everybody. Thanks.
And instead of Habitat for Humanity, we're going to have Rebuild the Fidel House.
Exactly. Be our class project.
Yeah. So Brian and Michael, do you guys want to add a few comments about the fundraising efforts?
I'll defer to you, Brian. Just to those of you who haven't made a donation, please consider doing it. And we're continually reaching out to our classmates. I believe we're at about 1.8 million at year end, and hopefully got a long way to go to get to our 4 million goal, but we'll get there.
Terrific.
Well, maybe it's important to get right to the main event, which is an opportunity to visit with President Kim. I must tell you, it's a real honor to be here with him. And today I was on campus a little bit early for this session, and you cannot believe, this is such a topic that is so important. You cannot believe the energy and the passion around what has gone on in Haiti. And I think all of you know Jim's background, a founder of PIH, which is an organization that's been delivering health care to the poor in Haiti for many, many years. You know of his role at the Brigham and Women's Partners Healthcare. You know of his role at Dartmouth Medical School. I just thought maybe a great way to start would be for you, Jim, to offer a couple of comments on what's happened here. I mean, this place is energized, and I know a lot of it. I know it's because of you, but give us just a sense of all the energy and positive things that are happening to help here on campus.
Well, when I came to Hanover, it was a question for me. I wasn't sure whether I'd still be able to participate in these sorts of things. And I had a very realistic sense of the difficulty and the complexity of the job. And when I came here and we really began to think about our financial situation and dig into where we were, we found that we have this $100 million gap starting next year. But when Haiti happened, I just had very brief conversations with people. And when I sent a message out just saying that, this has happened, we've already been asked to respond, we had a very small number of people who really stepped up, offered us their planes, gave us cash, physicians who volunteered to go to Haiti. The very modest beginning led to an incredible student effort. So the students have to date raised over $150,000, which is for the other Ivies, it's 10 times what the other Ivies have raised, and it's 3 times the largest other group, which is a multi-campus group called Face AIDS. So not only have these guys organized, but other campuses have started calling and trying to take lessons from what Dartmouth has done. It got to be so powerful that tonight I did a webcast earlier this evening, and we had people on from schools all over the country asking how was it that Dartmouth got so well organized. So $150,000, which we understand is going to be matched by the President's Leadership Council. They're just beginning, and more importantly, what they've done is they've said, we care about this for the long run. I mean, this is just the worst disaster. I've worked in Haiti for 22 years. It's the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. They have no infrastructure to begin with. Already 150,000 bodies recovered. This is going to be the worst disaster in the Western Hemisphere in a long time. And it can seem completely debilitating, completely hopeless. But our students are stepping up and saying, we're going to educate ourselves about Haiti, and we don't know what it's going to be. Maybe the person who's leading the effort is about to go into, I think it's Goldman Sachs, but it's one of the financial companies when she graduates. But she wants to take this with her and continue to say, those of us who have so much have a responsibility, certainly to the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere and the one that's faced the worst disaster. We need to continue to do something. So it's been amazing. And the responses I've gotten from the alums, we are now at Dartmouth, among colleges, by far the largest contributor to the relief effort in Haiti. So I think you can all be very, very proud of the students. I certainly am. And it's just been wonderful to hear of the alums as well, who, when I sent the letter out about what we were doing, have stepped up in a really major way. So, this is, I have to say, though, that I'm not surprised. And some of you have heard me say this already. But, when I invited a radio personality, a guy named Jack Beatty, who some of you, especially in Boston, there's a radio show called On Point. Jack Beatty was an editor of the Atlantic Monthly, and he lives in the area. And when I wrote to him, because I'd heard him on the radio so much and was interested in getting his sense of Dartmouth, he wrote me a beautiful letter in which he basically said, you are very lucky to be president of Dartmouth College. And he said, I taught a senior writing class last year. He sent me this in the fall. And I was teaching writing to senior creative writing students. And I feared the worst. Creative writing seniors at Dartmouth are probably the most thin-skinned and hypercritical people you could imagine. And he said, they all wrote well, some beautifully. He said, but what impressed me more than their writing was their decency. He said, I feared the worst. I feared too critical critiques. I feared hurt feelings. But what they accomplished, I told them, was a social miracle. They couched their critiques in compassion, even affection. When I told them what a miracle it was, the way they treated each other, they looked at me as if they didn't know what I was talking about. He said that he then asked Ned LeBeau, who's a government professor, about his experience. And Ned told him that in 40 years of teaching in 6 different institutions, he had never seen students who treated each other so well. And so it's not surprising. It's not surprising to me that these people who are so compassionate with each other, who care so deeply about so many things in their lives, would respond in this way. And I think it's what makes Dartmouth so special. You know, another person I'm fond of quoting is Ernest Martin Hopkins. So Ernest Martin Hopkins in 1945, at the installation ceremony of John Sloan Dickey, said, "What has impressed me more and more is the sweetness that attached to the relationships one to another of our community of Dartmouth." And you know, going out and seeing the alums, going out and seeing all of you in so many different places, watching how the students interact with each other, there's something really, really special about our connectedness to each other here at Dartmouth College. And so it doesn't surprise me that they so quickly extended that sweetness, extended that sense of compassion and community to the people of Haiti. And the fact that they did it and are saying that they're doing it because of what my work is, you know, it's really not me at all. It's really tapping into this great reservoir of goodness, this great reservoir of affection that makes up this Dartmouth community. So I couldn't be more proud. It's stunning, and it's wonderful because, you know, just before I came here, so at 5:30 I did the webcast with on Haiti, and then at 6:30 I went to an event in Dartmouth 105, you know, the classroom in Dartmouth, to talk about the heckling incident that we had with the squash team. And you know, what I expressed to the students is, I said, you know, I said these same things to them. I said, you know, I'm so impressed with you guys. It's the one thing when people ask me what surprised you most about Dartmouth when you got there, my answer is the same, the students. I knew they were good. I'd seen their board scores. I knew that this was a special group of people, but I was just amazed at how you treated each other, your commitment to your studies, your commitment to each other. And it's terrible that we get known for things like heckling at a squash match. It's really out of character with what happens here. And so what I did was, when it happened, I immediately apologized to Drew Faust because we were playing with the squash team was playing against the Harvard team. I called the families of the player who had been heckled and apologized and had a long discussion with him. And I came back to say to the students, look at what we've done in Haiti. This is what's truly at the core of the Dartmouth community. So let's not have these heckling incidents anymore, and let's in fact be leaders in the world and establish standards for how we behave at sporting matches that will, like the Haiti group, be a lesson for all the other colleges and universities in the country. So, you know, it was amazing. On the one side, at 5:30, I did this thing, which has put Dartmouth College in the headlines because we're the #1 school in the nation in terms of responding to Haiti. And then an hour later, I had to go and talk about the heckling incident that, you know, have people saying, oh gosh, you know, Dartmouth is still Animal House. So we've got both of those things going on, but what's at the core is this sense of relatedness that you guys understand. You were here, you know what that's like. And that's still here after so many years. We have to take that and build on it and let everyone understand that this is the finest institution for undergraduate education on the face of the earth.
So can we open it up for questions?
Let's do.
Are you ready?
Absolutely.
Okay. Cold call?
Well, I suppose I'll start with a general question. You've been at Dartmouth now for a little time, not a lot of time. You've done a lot of research into the college's history and past and where you hope it would go. If there was something immediate that you would want to change at the college, what would that be?
Well, you know, a couple of things that I've learned. You know, as I was coming into this job, I met with a woman at Harvard, the Kennedy School, the Harvard School of Education, who is a specialist on university presidencies. That's what she does. And so I asked her, what are the most important things about being the president of a place like Dartmouth College? And she said, the mistake that is made by unsuccessful college presidents and I won't name any names, but we were sitting in an area that's very close to one that now is living somewhere else. What she said was this. She said, most college presidents don't understand that there are three major parts of being a president. One is you have to be an inspiring leader. You have to get the troops fired up. You have to get the students fired up. That's very, very important. The second thing that's really important is you've got to be a good manager. You're running a huge business, and so you've got to at least know what your weaknesses are and be able to hire people who can help you run the place. But the third thing, and she said the third thing that every failed college president doesn't understand is the fact that you govern the institution along with your faculty. That you are not a CEO in the traditional sense. Everything you do has to go through the faculty. There is a reason for that. These places are run in ways that people in the business world say, how can you possibly sit through so many meetings? But the meetings have a sense to them. That every time I'm presenting financial data, which I've worked very hard to do, and the reason I've learned how to present this financial data is because of Bill Helman, who drives up here and gives me lessons on private equity and mark-to-market and underwater. I know a lot of that stuff, which is really very interesting, by the way.
Very exciting. Thrilling.
So what the most important thing I've learned is that anything in the area of curriculum, anything in the area of how we teach, these are things that you have to work through very carefully and slowly with the faculty. But if you look over time, you really can have a huge impact if you do things deliberately, with sensitivity, and with the constant understanding that you're governing this in collaboration with others. So what she said to me was, you've got to have two of the three qualities to be a good college president. But one of them has to be an understanding of governance. You can't be a good manager and inspiring leader and not understand governance, because that will be the end of you. So it was a very important lesson, and I learned it immediately when I got here. You cannot do an end run around faculty. So things like curriculum, we have to do it slowly. If I could change one thing immediately, though, I would try to get this community to really have a clear understanding of what we can be. We can do things here at Dartmouth that you can't do anywhere else. I keep talking about healthcare because we have just frankly the best healthcare delivery research team in the country. Republicans and Democrats all use the Dartmouth Atlas when they're talking about healthcare in the United States. We have a chance to actually fundamentally change the way people think about healthcare, and Dartmouth can do it better than any other place in the country. Now, with that group, we're on the same wavelength. We're going to establish a National Institute for Healthcare Delivery Science. It's going to be the first of its kind, and people are going to say, how crazy were we? We had a National Institute of Health, we were doing research, we were coming up with new clinical tools, and we never applied science to delivery. And so we're going to do that. And that's going to, I hope, send a signal that says, you know what? There's nothing that we do at Dartmouth that we can't be the best in the world at doing. And so there's a kind of sense here sometimes of, well, we're a very tight community. We treat each other very, very well. So we don't want any one group to stand too high above the others. It's like I felt like I was in Japan, And there's a kind of egalitarian spirit here that's almost like Japan. And I think that's great in a lot of ways. But there's one thing I changed. I would like every single group here at Dartmouth to think we are going to be the best in the world. And we're going to be the best in the world, not just because we want to, show off the Dartmouth label or that it's about us, but because if we're the best in the world at doing these things, then our students will continue to get the best education in the world. This stuff on healthcare delivery is going to go all the way into the undergraduate level. We're talking about in 5 or 10 years having 20, 30, 40% of every tax dollar going in to pay for healthcare. So I think it's one of the great issues, if you will, as Jocelyn Dickey used to talk about, that every one of our undergraduates should talk about. So I think there is huge untapped potential here. I think we can be the best in the world at a lot of different things, and I want to be the sort of advocate and cheerleader in chief to really push people to just take the potential by the horns and really push to be world class in everything we do.
Thank you.
city to hear from.
Sure. I'll ask a question. I asked this question at the dinner in Connecticut, and I'm not sure all my classmates here would share this, but I think the college needs to grow larger in size than the current undergraduate body. I'm not saying a lot, and I'm curious what your thoughts are about this. And the people who don't like it, you can call or email me later because you all have that. So,
before you answer, that's Mike McClintock. Can I make a suggestion? Can you just say who you are so President Kim knows? Okay.
Yes, it's Mike McClintock.
Oh, Mike McClintock.
So Mike, one of the interesting things about having a $100 million deficit is that we have looked under every stone. We have worked so hard, looked at everything. Let me just give you an example of how closely we're looking at things. We found out that our facilities operation and our Office of Residential Life, the dorms, purchase plastic waste paper, garbage bags from 2 different sources. And they do it in a way that costs us probably $100,000 or more, right? So we're looking at everything, including how we buy garbage bags, because it's important, because we want to make the case that our alums should invest in Dartmouth. But we also need to come back and be able to say, we've looked at everything, and we now know why we're spending what we're spending on everything. We were thinking about hiring Deloitte & Touche or some consulting company to come and work with us to get better at this, because there's not a single consultant or MBA who looks at business process in this whole place. There's not one. And so we talked to Deloitte & Touche, and they gave us a pro bono price that was just unbelievable. So what we did was we talked to the person who was going to lead that team to come and work with us. It was several $1 million at Deloitte & Touche. And we asked her if she'd want to come and work at Dartmouth. And so we hired her for much, much less money. We have her here. So we're looking at everything. This is a person who's looked at business processes across institutions, state organizations, higher education. She's fantastic. So we're looking at that. Now, what we found about raising the size of the class. 1, the real cost here is in keeping this place going. So, we have to pay for the upkeep of the buildings. We're paying our loan payments. There's just a huge cost of running this place. So if we add 50 to 100 students, even if we give them financial aid at the current rate, because we're not adding a new dormitory or doing something else to worsen our debt service, we can actually realize a very, very positive increase in our budget. A
contribution.
We actually realize quite a large contribution, even if it's 50 to 100. So we can add 50 to 100 students easily without having to build a new dormitory. We're going to have to hire a few new faculty, but that actually doesn't take away from what we would realize by adding some students. So we're actually probably going to go up at least 50 this year, and we're thinking about going even larger. This all depends on the board meeting that we're going to have on February 5th and 6th, but we think it actually could make sense. We have to be very careful not to let the student-teacher ratio, get worse. But we think we can do that. Also, it's so hard to get into Dartmouth College. Close to 20,000 applications this year for just 1,000 spots. It is getting harder and harder and harder. The average SAT score is through the roof. These are all unbelievable leaders. And our admission, the percent that we admitted last year was around 12%, which is 4th or 5th in the country. So opening it up to more students, we think, is probably a good idea. But again, we have to get final approval from our board.
How about San Francisco? Cammie, Brent, Paul? Put that BlackBerry away. Brad?
Busted. Go ahead.
So, President Kim, you did a great job. Thank you so much for talking to San Francisco on Thursday. For those of you who don't know, almost 700 Dartmouth people showed up at this talk, and President Kim got a standing ovation. It was an exciting time. You talked about your vision for the college and how you were pulling in Thayer and Tuck and the medical school, and you talked a little bit about it before, but could you give us a little bit more detail or share your ideas? Because we really
Well, so,
appreciate it on Thursday.
So linking the professional schools with the undergraduate school is really important. You may or may not know, but the two most popular majors, fastest growing and most popular majors now among undergraduate students, are sustainability and global health. Now we do both of those things pretty well here. And so one of the ideas that we had, that we're really looking carefully at, is what if you could come to Dartmouth and then in your sophomore year apply and be accepted to Dartmouth Medical School, to Tuck, to Thayer, and then we would begin to shape your liberal arts education to prepare you to be a great leader in business, in global health, in healthcare delivery. I mean, there's not a single program in the country that's preparing the leaders of tomorrow who will fix the healthcare delivery system. It's hard to believe. In medical school, you don't teach healthcare delivery. But my view is that the way you really prepare people to be leaders in healthcare delivery, because it's such a complicated enterprise, is that you've got to start at the undergraduate level. So we're looking now at announcing, as early as this summer, that when you come to Dartmouth College, if you're admitted to Dartmouth College, you can come and in your second or third year apply to these great programs where you're admitted to Dartmouth graduate schools, and then we prepare you for a career in some of these very exciting new areas that we'll be able to do better than anyone else, because again, the key is the quality of your liberal arts education. So you've got the perspective and the breadth to be able to tackle problems as difficult as sustainability, healthcare delivery, global health. So there's a lot of excitement here on campus on that, and we think that it's going to contribute to Dartmouth being the hottest school in the country. That's our goal. Dartmouth should be, because of the quality of the education, we think it should be the hottest school in the United States. And little things that we do to integrate the professional schools with Dartmouth College, we think will do that. Now, a secret that I'll just share with the alums is that we admit about 80 students a year to Dartmouth Medical School. If we admitted half of those students from Dartmouth College, that would dramatically improve the quality of our first-year medical students. Dartmouth students are that good. And the quality of our undergraduates is still quite a bit better than the quality of our, for example, Dartmouth Medical School students. So it's a win-win all around. Some people, we were talking at one point about admitting them right out of high school. But then what would happen is that the 40 or so that would get admitted right out of high school would come, and the others would be disappointed and they wouldn't come. So bringing them in the first year and then making them apply the second year is a good idea, because first of all, it's hard to know whether high school students really prepared for that kind of a program. But after a year or two, they get a pretty good sense of what they want to do in their lives, and then we can start tailoring their broad liberal arts education in a way that I think will change the way people think about higher education in some significant ways.
Chicago, we haven't heard from you. Rob or Brian? You guys don't have a whole lot of people to pass it on to.
Sure. The last time we were up at Hanover for our 25th reunion, there was a fair amount of building going on around the campus. Assume most of that's obviously been brought to a conclusion, but we've heard about the impact of the fiscal crisis on the operating budget of the college. How have things played out with respect to the capital expenditures and facilities construction on the college?
So, one of the things that college and university presidents often complain about is when they walk into a job, they see all this deferred maintenance. Because deferred maintenance is exactly where you take your money for exciting programs, a lot of the time. And, very grateful to Jim Wright for not doing that. This is a beautiful campus. Jim did a fantastic job in building up the campus in such important ways. So we have some deferred maintenance.
We just lost the.
We lost you. We lost you guys.
Where's our gentleman? No, it's on their end, I think.
I think it's on your end.
We can't hear you guys. We can't hear you.
That's good, Bill.
Check.
No, I just.
You look good, though.
We can't hear the president. They haven't touched anything. They're sitting in chairs.
I think it's on Dartmouth's end, because I hear everybody else.
Yeah.
Same.
Can hear you, yes.
So they either mute.
New York, you can hear?
Yeah,
We can hear all
we
of
can
you
hear
guys.
everybody, other than.
Can you hear us,
Did we
Bill?
cut? Did we cut funding to the video system at the college?
There it is.
I can hear that.
That is good. There's a rodent that just cut through the sound cord.
Sorry, President Kim, you were cut. Maybe you could start over with the answer. Can you guys? Are you? Oh, they're not on yet.
No, we can't hear them yet. Kevin's
Okay.
walking into the room.
Might have been one of the deferred maintenance things.
All right, I'm gonna drop him and just bring him right back.
Cammy, what else did they talk about?
Oh, starting over.
I'm give me 1 second. I'm gonna bring him back in.
Yeah. What else did we talk about? They talked about the great issues.
Yeah.
About fraternities.
Did you go to the video?
Cammy,
were all 700 of those people? Where were those 700? Were they all Dartmouth grads?
Well,
I've seen
some
some emails, you know.
So it was really a great talk, and what was exciting is that we knew almost no one, which means a lot of people are reconnecting. He talked about bringing back the great issues and teaching that during sophomore summer, and he'd actually take a full role in that. So that could be pretty exciting. And then, you know, he talked about how great he thinks fraternities are, and he looked at it from an anthropological point of view. And he talked about his love for football. What else did he talk about? He just told great stories. He's really done his research. He goes back and has talked to a lot of the older alums to try to get a feeling for the history. And so he seems pretty green. I wouldn't be surprised if he eats green eggs and ham. So,
Well,
do
he's
you guys
already
have
quoted. He's already quoted at least three Dartmouth presidents, right? So he's working his way up to getting them all quoted here at one
his
point.
way up, yeah. We went to this. We didn't go to dinner. Oh, we went to the big event. Yeah. Do you have anything you want to add?
That was good.
No?
That was good.
Okay.
Good, Kim.
Good. So, how's the weather in Chicago?
Cold. Very cold.
Okay.
Rain delay.
We're back to winter again.
Well,
How is it in San Francisco? No, don't tell me. Don't tell
It's
me.
raining.
Is
It's
it
not raining.
No,
It's
no,
actually
it's
there.
Oh,
not
that's
good.
right. Yeah, they've had
2 weeks of
lot of
rain.
rain.
Right?
Yeah.
It's wonderful. Get out from underneath the sunlight.
So while we're here, you know, we were talking about what kind of gift we should give for the 30th reunion. And before the meeting started, well, we might as well get some business done.
Go for it, Mike.
I favor the nice Dartmouth vest and a hat because I think you wear those all the time. But that's just me. I'm throwing it out here for comments. And because Susan is working on that, and you know, it's kind of hard to get a sustainably green
Can you guys hear
fleece.
Hear us?
Cheap fleece.
Hello?
Oh, you're coming back.
Oh, there we go.
Guys,
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, you're supporting the tough answer
Each
now.
other, so it's within your back.
I was going to say, as long as we don't put the date on the vest, we're okay. Yeah.
So quick answer to the
Yeah, I just-
facilities
he's gonna
manager.
donate.
We've
That's what I thought.
got 3 major projects. So the life sciences building, supported mostly by the class of '78, is getting close to done, and it would be crazy for us to stop that at this point. And also, we need it. There is the possibility that we would lose some of our biology faculty if we don't have a state-of-the-art facility. So it's going to go forward. It's great. There's been tremendous support for it. It's going to happen. The other thing that was hanging over our head was the class of '53 comments. The class of 1953 gave us $12 million, and we were looking at building something near the McLaughlin cluster, right near Dick's Place. And what happened was that we figured out that in order to do the job, we'd have to take about a $25 million loan, and it would be $2 to $3 million a year thereafter. So we couldn't figure out how to do that, and we were just so sad about this because the class of '53 they would send me notes saying, Jim, we're losing our classmates. We got to do something about this. It was heartbreaking. So we started getting creative. And Linda Snyder, our new chief facilities officer, vice president actually for facilities, started asking questions about, well, what about Thayer? So Thayer Dining Hall is still standing, and we spend almost $800,000 a year basically heating the air around Thayer because there's no insulation and the systems are so old. We thought we'd have to demolish the building, but what we found was that we can rename Thayer because it's not named after Sylvanus Thayer from the engineering school. It's actually named after like a fourth cousin of his who was a trustee who never really gave us any money. so we contacted the family and said what would they think about us renaming the place. So it's going to be the Class of 53 Commons. We still have to take a loan to do all the refurbishment. But what's going to happen is it's going to go from a kind of broken up facility to being an all-you-can-eat dining facility with 2 huge function rooms that will turn into alternative social spaces at night, and ones something that's been called for every year and we haven't been able to build. So the thing is, we're going to save so much money on heating and other aspects of the upkeep that the savings will pay for whatever we have to pay on the loan, so we're going to break even. We're very excited about that. We thought, again, this is another way that a $100 million deficit forced us to be creative. Finally, we had the Visual Arts Center. We've already raised, Carrie, what's the number?
We've already raised $56 million.
$56 million. It's going to cost more than that to operate it going forward. But we have 1,000 students a year taking courses in studio art and the other things that are going to be taught in that building. 1,000 students a year. And we felt that, first of all, this gift was an incredibly largest gift that we'd ever received. It was going to go away if we didn't build a Visual Arts Center. We have 1,000 students a year who use the place. And if you're committed to a liberal arts education, having a Visual Arts Center is a really important signal of that commitment. So those 3 things are going forward. And we've always said, yes, we have a $100 million deficit, but we're not going to cut across the board and be timid about it. We're going to say there are things we're going to cut a lot, and there are things that we're going to grow because we're going to be strategic about the way we move forward and not just try to introduce some sort of tepid notion of fairness and cut 10% across the top. That won't move us where we need to go. There are things we're going to grow. There are things we're going to cut deeply. There are things that we're going to have to stop doing.
But the capital expenditures are funded out of a separate bucket, if you will, than the operating bucket, right? So essentially they should be, one would think, a little more sacrosanct or a little more covered than the rest of the operating budget, right?
Right. Well, one of the things that a lot of colleges and universities, especially among our peers, did was that in the time when the endowments were growing so quickly, what they would do is they would take a small naming gift and then put the rest of it on the endowment to, hoping that we were going to keep growing at 10, 15, 20% a year. We now know that we can't do that, which is why we had to look so carefully at the Class of 53 Commons. There's a bit of that going on, but we have such a large proportion of the building costs and some of the operating costs already funded that we feel confident going forward.
Thank you.
This is Merle. So many of us at once.
Boston.
Go ahead.
It's Alex Frank. And Mike's question before about the size of the student body made me kind of wonder what you think of something else that's unique to Dartmouth that relates to that, which is the Dartmouth Plan. Because, one thing that I find that you can talk to any Dartmouth student, even the Dartmouth students of today, about is the fact that every Dartmouth student learns how to pack and move about 7 times in 4 years. So, increasing the student body once before resulted in the Dartmouth Plan. And do you think it's a good thing that we have that plan, or?
So, here's what I've learned about the Dartmouth Plan. First, the professors love it. So the professors are a little bit concerned about how quickly you have to teach something, the 10-week term. But it has been a way for us to attract great professors, because what they do is they teach 4 classes over the course of a year, but what they'll generally do is teach 2 classes one term, 2 classes another term, and they'll have 2 full terms then to do their research, and often do research with undergraduate students. So they like it. I've heard very mixed reports on the Dartmouth plan. So, Buddy Tevens, the football coach, doesn't like it because he loses sometimes his students, his best players, in the winter and spring session when most of the when they're building bulk, as he says, by hitting the weight room. Students are mixed on it. I hear a lot of students. I don't. Partly it's because it's like fish in water. They don't know any other system. But I don't hear major complaints about the D plan sort of moving toward getting rid of it because they love sophomore summer. I mean, sophomore summer is just that was my first experience, is being here for sophomore summer. They love sophomore summer, and we've been talking about reinstating the Great Issues course. That's the perfect time to do it. To have a single course where every single one of the students are sitting in the class having a conversation with each other about important issues. So, I hear lots of different things, tremendous benefits of it, and also some of the downsides of it. Just to give you a sense of how creative we think we're trying to be, one of the things that the professors complain about the D plan is that the students go away for Thanksgiving and then come back and they go right into exams. And they think that students really lose their concentration in that period. So we're thinking of ending the first term before Thanksgiving. And then what we would be able to do is by ending before Thanksgiving and either going dark, which is closing a lot of the buildings, that will mean that we will have to go into furloughs for some of our workers. That actually saves us about $6 million to do that, to go dark during that period of time. The professors like the idea, the students like the idea, because going back and forth on Thanksgiving and coming back for exams is something that they don't like. And if you're home at Thanksgiving and you've got a whole month, you can actually do something very significant during that period of time. So we're trying to be as creative as we can be. I can't see how we would go back to a semester system. And the president of George Washington University was saying, the semester system is terrible. The semester system was devised at a time when farmers in the Midwest needed their children to work in the summer. And so, now that most of our students don't work on the farm during the summer, and schools all over the world are having their students in class for longer than we are. This is at the high school, junior high level. And the conversation now in education is, why don't we go all year round? The president of George Washington says, I use my facilities 50% of the time, and it's incredibly inefficient. There are some schools that do a lot better. Dartmouth is one, and they do a lot better because they have a mandatory summer session for the sophomores. So no other school has adopted the Dartmouth plan yet. But what we're finding is that other schools are looking intensively at Dartmouth because we are using our facilities more effectively and for a longer period of time than almost any other school in the country.
Thank you.
There were some questions from Boston.
Yep, this is Merle Adelman from Boston. And funny, you had quoted, I think we counted three former presidents of Dartmouth College. You often quote John Sloan Dickey in saying that there are no problems that better human beings cannot fix. Can you define what you mean by better human beings?
So, we have this great program called the Montgomery Fellowship. And Harl and Ken Montgomery bought a house for us right on Rope Ferry Drive. And we have these wonderful, usually artists and scholars who are coming in. We have a woman here now named Terry Tempest Williams. She's a wonderful author. She's Mormon, and she's written some really interesting books about lots of different topics. And she took me on this very topic. And she said, I just didn't know what you were talking about when you kept quoting the phrase. And the phrase, to give it to you in full, at Convocation in 1946, John Sloan Dickey said, the world's troubles are your troubles. But since most troubles come from the hearts of men, there is nothing wrong with the world that better human beings can't fix. And he was talking about nuclear force. That was his big concern, the power of the nuclear age, and that peace and better human relations and better understanding was what he was really talking about, and that's why he brought so many people to campus. But take a look at a particular problem, healthcare delivery. We all know that this is a huge, huge problem. It's a problem for President Obama. It's going to be a problem when Medicare and Medicaid goes from $900 billion a year to $2.5 trillion in the next 5 or 6 years. It's a problem for all of us. Are we producing the kind of human beings who can solve that problem? And I would argue that we're not. You have to start with a liberal arts education because you're running a very complex organization that's scientific, but it has to do with human relations and strategy and operations and management. So you get an MBA. Well, an MBA is great, but it doesn't, the one at Harvard anyway, doesn't really teach you how to run a complex organization and deliver healthcare. What about medical school? Medical schools don't teach delivery at all. And at Harvard Medical School, before I left, our visiting committee, our board, kept saying, why don't you teach delivery? What's the matter with you guys? This is the biggest problem in healthcare. Why don't you teach delivery? So I think that without being narrow, there's no such thing as pre-leadership for healthcare delivery. You wouldn't want to narrow down. What you want to do is get people into a liberal arts education that teaches them things like looking at things from multiple perspectives, that teaches them things like the nature of incentives and human motivation that you learn from Shakespeare, for example. That breadth of undergraduate education linked to a much more thoughtful and not prescriptive, but intentional approach to preparing them to take on this huge problem. I think, again, we can do that here at Dartmouth better than anywhere else. Just to give you an example, at Harvard, it's a great school. I love the school. But when I started working with Michael Porter at Harvard Business School, this was the issue that we were talking about. And the way we put it was this: how do you develop a science of execution around social goals, education, health, social welfare? That was our conversation. But when I started working with him, we wanted to run a course together. We had to start with a memorandum of understanding between Harvard Medical School and Harvard Business School, almost like a peace treaty. And they still haven't worked out how the two schools will work together. At Dartmouth, we don't have those kind of firewalls between the different schools. And because we're a smaller community, we think that we can come up with these ways of producing new kinds of human beings with new kinds of training, with a breadth of experience that will let them deal with complex situations. That's what we can do. There was a newspaper article, an article in the New York Times just the last week that was saying that Stanford is trying to build a liberal arts MBA, where they're giving them classes in critical thinking, just the kind of things we do so well in a liberal arts education, because they think that in the global business climate, if you don't have that skill that you get from a liberal arts education, you're not going to be successful. Rotman in Toronto and the Stanford Business School were the two that were mentioned. But boy, we can do that by reaching back into the undergraduate education in a way that I think very few other schools could. So that's the kind of new human being. I think we can do that by being creative in the way we organize our educational experience.
Thank you.
I'm sitting here listening to Jim Kim speak. I remember one of the first times he and I talked about his taking the presidency at Dartmouth. He started off by saying, he said, "I'm just a simple infectious disease doc." I mean, that's amusing.
Simple-minded doctor.
Other questions?
Yeah.
Annie, Susan.
Right. Hey, Bob. So I'm Susan Fagerstrom, and I asked a question of you at the great big gathering to send you off in Boston. And I thought you had the absolute perfect answer, which impressed me. And I'm
sure
sure
you can do it again.
See if you can do it again.
But I'll remind you. I asked where you thought the women's experience was at Dartmouth, and your answer that I thought was so perfect because it spoke the way Dartmouth speaks was to say that you understood that the men still control the tap. And my question is, if you have any other thoughts on that, but I guess I'm going to lead you a little bit in terms of some of your thoughts about developing global leaders. Have you thought about making Dartmouth renowned for developing women as global leaders in whatever field they are? Because I think
It's a good question.
If we were to take that, it would really turn somewhat of the reputation of Dartmouth around. And I do think that the women coming out of Dartmouth are very strong. So you've already got sort of the raw material for that.
It's a great question, and it's one that comes up for me all the time. So, we have, when I just in the session I was just before about talking about heckling, what I said to the students is, I love you guys, but we have a public relations problem. There's many college counselors in high schools, in the great high schools, still say, why would you go to Dartmouth? Dartmouth is a men's school. I mean, we still hear that. We still hear that. And they say, even if there are women there, men control everything, and it's a hostile environment for women. I've heard that too. Now, I haven't found that here. I have found pockets of people who are very angry about the fraternity system. But guess what? 67% of the eligible women and 61% of the eligible men are in the fraternity and sorority system. So they're voting with their feet to join the system. So just a couple of other pieces of data that I found remarkable. Of the students who are admitted to Dartmouth who chose to go to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and these other schools, 20 to 30% of them, the second highest item in their response, said that they didn't go to Dartmouth because of the Greek system. So it was a very important reason for them choosing not to go to Dartmouth. If you look at the students who did come to Dartmouth, the percentage of the ones who chose to come to Dartmouth, 1% said they came to Dartmouth because of the Greek system, and yet 61 and 67% pledge when they get here. What does that mean? Well, I think that the people in the Greek system have a great experience there. The 30 or 40% who are outside of it have sometimes very, very angry critiques of the system, and a lot of it revolves around gender issues. So one of the things that we're trying to do here is to create more sororities. Now, I haven't had time to get that deeply into it to figure out in my own mind whether I think that's the right response. But I think that what we need to do is to just get out there and say, this is the place to go if you are a woman and you want to become a leader in these great fields. And the number of fields can expand over time. And that our commitment to making the Dartmouth experience a fantastic one for women couldn't be higher. Now, we're beginning to have the conversations. As you can imagine, it's a very intense conversation. There are people who say that this is a terrible place for women. Say that the women on campus seem very happy to me for the most part. I mean, this is about as happy a campus as I have ever seen, and that is consistently remarked upon by the people who come to visit. When people get past the stereotypes and come to visit, our yield is over 75%. So when they come, they love the place. And when they come, the reason they say they love the place is because they say, people are so happy, people are so friendly, people are so open. So I'm not quite sure how to do it, but it's exactly the right goal for us. We have to be known as the preferential place that you go if you're a woman and you want to become a great leader in the world. That's what we have to do, and we've got to figure out how to make that happen.
So doesn't Dartmouth have it's Mike again, a Women in Science program which we used to broadcast, and I was always shocked that Smith was able to say what a fabulous Women in Science program they have, and really we were far and away first and larger. The other thing is that I would argue on the women's side is that we have I'm not trying to get into politics here, but we have a senator from New York who's a Dartmouth graduate who is in a sorority.
Exactly.
And it seems to me that in our publications we don't tend to broadcast enough about successful women. I think that's actually sort of an easy thing to solve. I mean, maybe it's just my perception, but I had one brother and 4 sisters, so I tend to be a little bit more attuned to this. And 3 of my sisters went to Smith. They all hate Dartmouth. So I've lived with that.
Well, this is part of it. I mean, I think my job is to be advocate in chief for Dartmouth, and a lot of college and university professors really don't like the public relations part of their job. Now, I came to public relations out of necessity because we realized when we were trying to improve treatment for drug-resistant tuberculosis and trying to improve treatment for HIV, we just realized that we had to be good at talking to people about a problem. So I've actually had a lot of media training. When I was at WHO, at the World Health Organization, they actually had me go through intensive media training because we did every 6 months huge press conferences talking about progress around HIV. So I find it very easy to talk about the strengths of Dartmouth, and I think I have to get out there and talk about that. I think what you will all see. We're going to be sending it out to all alums about how we've been responding to Haiti. I think it's a really good first step. I think there's just great things that we're doing that just we can get out there, and I also think that there's been a sense it's related to this wonderful sense of community and egalitarianism. But I think there's been a bit of a what's the right word? An ambivalence about really getting out there and talking about how great Dartmouth is. Well, I have none of that ambivalence, and I understand that that's my job.
And I think Jim's right about sort of the quality of the young women that are here, and he doesn't feel it when he's on campus, which I understand. Just before we came in here, one of the women who's been really leading the charge on Dartmouth students' effort in Haiti, Molly, she's a superstar.
She's a superstar.
You can project her forward for sure, and I think, you're all, the point that you're raising is such a good one, and I think there's, at least 3 times more women here than we were. There's a lot more raw material to work with.
See, I think it's really important that the students are forced to deal with each other here. They can't bleed out into Cambridge or Philadelphia or New York. They're forced to deal with each other. And I am just so impressed with the way they treat each other. And I think those are incredibly important lessons going forward. And I think it's we can make the very strong case that this is a great place for women to go to school. And I will do that.
So maybe you've been incredibly generous with your time. I was here this afternoon. I saw your schedule. It's incredible, but I think it comes from the bottom of your heart and your passion and your aspiration. And I think we're all part of a community that would be better off for that. And I think it's obvious to me what we can all do to help to be a part of this. I mean, this is a revolution. And for those of you who've not been on campus, and you will be in June, which will be great. But I know Brad and Alex and others, for example, have kids here. This is the first time in a long time that Dartmouth has had this aspirational set of goals. They're driven by this guy right here, and it's amazing to see the energy around those goals. So tell us a little bit about how we can help, how we can support your agenda for making Dartmouth I think you used the hottest. I like that word. It's a little bit beyond my coolness factor, but I like it. The place where men and women leaders come, young kids come to become. So tell us how we can be helpful.
Well, first thing is we want you to come back. Please come back here. This is a great place. It's a beautiful place. The building that Jim Wright did. The way that, places like, if you haven't seen Fahey Hall, for example, Peter Fahey from the class of 68 built a brand new dormitory.
Brad's daughter lives there, and Alex's daughter lives there. Brad's son, Alex's daughter.
It's it looks like it's been there.
I'd like to move in.
Years. It looks like it's been brand new. So just come and visit us and come see us. Carrie would kill me if I didn't say this. The work that you're doing in trying to support the Dartmouth College Fund. Let me just, for me, the one thing that I really don't have is unrestricted money to be able to do the things that we need to do. For example, when we're at risk of losing a professor, having Dartmouth College Fund money where we can step in and be able to support a new package for somebody we just can't afford to lose. This is really important. But let me put it this way. Of course, it's predictable for me to say that supporting the Dartmouth College Fund is important. But what we really want you to do is to re-engage, to come here. Denise has been really helpful for us. We're trying to find a way to, at very low cost, redo the Hanover Inn. Because, our great friend and trustee Steve Roth, who I think owns more property in New York and understands property like no one else. Steve Roth refers to the Hanover Inn as a dump. Now, I have to be more polite than that. But we want you to come back. We want you to make it a regular thing that you do every year. Come back for a week. Come take classes. Come see what we're doing here. Because, for us, having you come, telling us what you think, giving us a critique when you need, and being engaged with this community is something that we want you to do. Through the generosity of Denise and her family, the Dartmouth Skiway is better than it's ever been. It is fantastic. We've got a big, huge lodge there. There's hardly anyone there because it's also another well-kept secret. Ski in the winter. Come play golf. I'll play golf with you in the summer. I play every morning at 5. Not every morning, but I play a lot with the golf team members at 5 o'clock in the morning. It's a beautiful place, but more than anything else, re-engage with the intellectual life of this community. We want to build a community that is having the best and most important conversations. They're going to be conversations where we're absolutely committed to free speech and having every viewpoint represented. But we're going to have that conversation, and we want you to participate in it as well. So, very straightforward. Come and be engaged. Come visit us. Come spend time with us, and tell everybody that that we need their support. But more than that, tell them that we're looking under every stone. We're not leaving any stone unturned. We're going to be able to tell you about our procurement practices for garbage bags. That's how committed we are to getting it right. We're going to run the most efficient college or university that anyone's ever seen because we're going to look at every single business process and make it work well. And then at that point, we hope that you will feel that we're deserving of a level of support that will allow us to be the hottest school in the United States.
So if I can just add my 2 cents, and that's awfully hard. I think the key is engage and get to know more about what Jim is thinking and saying. A lot of his conversations and discussions are on the website. There's alumni elections, there's trustee elections, there's the Dartmouth College Fund. Denise and I are all in on this. I mean, this is not our avatar sitting here. We're really here in Hanover.
We really mean it. You have a direct line as class of 80, so you can be in touch with us.
And we're all in. And I think, as Jim keeps meeting members of our class, he keeps saying to me, how come all the great ones are in the same class? He didn't really say that. I made that up. But seriously, now is the time. Now is the time where we can make an incredible difference on many, many dimensions. So to me, the key word is engage. You've engaged by being here. It's late at night in Boston, and you're 40 miles outside of Boston. Thank you very, very much, New York and Chicago and San Mateo. Ross, I see you came in a little late. Thank you for being here. We really, really appreciate it. And Denise and I, anytime you have an idea or thought, and John Rich, by the way, who's the third class of 1980 trustee, who lives in Philadelphia, couldn't be here tonight, is an incredible guy, speaking of healthcare delivery. He runs the Jefferson Healthcare Center down there, and it's just written, this is a remarkable classmate. So we can make a difference, and now's the time. So thank you very much. Thank you, Jim. Really appreciate your taking the time. And we'll see you in June, if not sooner.
If not sooner. Come visit us. Thank you very much.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.